Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Hell hath no fury like a neighbor scorned. Today in the rLounge, money can't buy everything. A neighbor from hell finds himself canceled. There will be no reboot for this guy. Rich and evil neighbor made my life a living hell, so I exposed his evilness and ruined his reputation. I'm Mark, an ordinary man living a simple life in Willowdale. I'm a spouse and a father of two. Willowdale life was as simple as it got. I was living a typical late 30s life, just like the rest of us. On weekdays, I work as a data analyst in MNC and spend my evenings with my wonderful family. On weekends, I would take my family to an amusement park or plan movie and karaoke nights at home. Until I met the personification of narcissism, Chad Reynolds, my nightmare neighbor in his late 30s. Chad is one of those people who gets everything in life without putting in any effort. Born into an affluent household, he believed that the universe revolved around him. He's in his late 30s, but he still acts like an aimless teenager. I don't think he understands what life is all about. Last Christmas, he moved into my neighborhood, turning my world upside down. He has a big house that not only threw a permanent shadow over my cute little house, but also made my bright and fulfilling life full of darkness. His big parties and never-ending noise pollution had driven me insane. The constant disturbances were too much for anyone, and it was only a matter of time before I couldn't take it any longer. When I moved here, I tried to establish a positive friendship with him in the hopes of reliving my nostalgic past as a bachelor. I attempted to involve him in neighborhood activities and events whenever possible to give him a chance to connect with his neighbors, as most of them were already annoyed by his behavior. Not only that, my wife always used to collect his mail and parcels when he was away for his trips, but he wasn't thankful at all. He is one of those people who live in a delusionary world where they believe everyone must obey them simply because they are wealthy. Initially, I wasn't much thinking maybe he was just one of those persons who doesn't know how to express themselves or exhibit empathy. But Chad is one of those people who literally gets on your nerves. I used to control my temperament, but now with every passing day, things are getting difficult because of the way he speaks to me. Also, one of my biggest concerns is my daughter and wife's safety, as my wife had told me that he hangs out with ill-mannered people and they keep passing unnecessary comments whenever they see my wife. Chad is not only causing problems in my life, but society as a whole is sick of him. When no one was home, he dumped all of his trash in front of an older citizen's house. When anyone questions him, he denied everything and tried to blame everything on me. Fortunately, the old couple had a good bond with me and were also aware of Chad's bad behavior, so they didn't believe him. But I was furious, and I wanted to have a confrontation with him that day. But my wife stopped me and explained how confronting him would make things worse for us. At the end of the day, I have a job and I don't want to get engaged in any legal proceedings. I'm just hoping I somehow get some extra patience so that I can deal with this rude dude. Despite this false charge, I have installed a security camera on my lawn facing his house to demonstrate my thesis in such future scenarios. The security camera sounds like a great start. It's hard when we can't control who chooses to live around us. That has to be infuriating. It's understandable that you'd want to try to make it friendlies with this guy like this. Staying on his good side is a strategic plan, but at the same time, a guy like that quite literally doesn't care and knows he can get away with it. So the fact that your wife was picking up his mail and parcels without thanks isn't surprising. Like you said, he thinks the world revolves around him. So why shouldn't people wait on him hand and foot? Update 1. Well, Chad appears to have decided to make my life a living hell because I was about to have a fistfight with my neighbor from hell last weekend. It all started when his wicked backyard speakers created chaos. It wasn't the first time we had to hear his awful music collection, but this time I lost my temper because my little princess, who had been suffering from typhoid, was trying to fall asleep. Despite a request to lower the volume over the phone, the music volume continued to rise. It wasn't just music, it was a tremor in my eardrums. So, I decided to visit his house directly and confront him. When I got inside his gate, I was in shock to see the condition of his super expensive car. The car was crying for help just like me. It is a black car, but with dust. It looks silver. Without getting distracted, I moved in and looked at the mess he had made in his backyard. I was disgusted to see that. I think just being rich is not enough to be a social and hygienic man. Even my dog, Adam, cleans his spot before sitting. How can someone throw a party in this mess, I asked myself. Above all, I saw that there were broken beer bottles spilled all over his lawn, to make it difficult for me to walk without light. So, I turned on my phone's flashlight and kept walking towards his main entrance. I won't lie, it does feel a little weird to go to a party uninvited, but it was about my daughter's health, so I went in and said, "Chad, I've asked you nicely to lower your music. Can't you show some consideration for your neighbors?" This was the first time in all these few months when I have confronted Chad face to face. I was nervous, but at the same time, very frustrated. Upon hearing my words, Chad replied with a devil's smile. "Consideration? Please. My parties are legendary, and you're just jealous because your life is so dull." Hearing this coming from a man who has not done anything in life except spend his parents' hard-earned money recklessly made me feel pity for him. But I controlled my anger, and I thought I should try one more time to explain to him the exact reason for my request. I told him that my 9-year-old daughter was sick and doctors had recommended proper rest for her recovery. But because of Chad's everyday parties and high music on speaker, she is unable to fall asleep and her health is getting worse day by day. Now, after hearing something so serious, any normal human being would definitely show some sort of empathy and try to cooperate. But Chad, being Chad, again proved why I call him a neighbor from hell. "Why do people like you even have kids when you can't afford to sleep in a hotel in a situation like this?" he smirked. "Why do you want to paint us as villains because you can't care for your brats?" His laughter was not mere laughter. It was an insult to my pleadings. All of his ill-mannered pals began laughing and boosting him after hearing this. I was furious at him and wanted to hit him in the face. But my wife had already followed me to their apartment, and I didn't want to make a commotion and make it impossible for her to live in my absence. So, I simply went home and tried to calm myself. I was feeling so helpless. This was the first time in these last few years when I felt so useless because I couldn't even protect my family from this devil. I was so angry that I was literally shaking. After having water and calming myself, I decided to call the cops on him. I was hoping that after this, Chad would finally stop playing music to such high levels, but I overheard Chad bragging to a friend about how he could buy his way out of any trouble. The cops did arrive, but Chad's charm attack was so effective that they left without taking any action. So all of this for absolutely nothing. I am even more pissed off now. Venting out here because it's choking me from the inside. In situations like this, it's important to go to authorities. I think it's a waiting game with people like this. You have to sort of build up a portfolio with the police. You don't know what this guy is capable of physically, and by going to him directly, there was potential to really get hurt. Would you have knocked on his door? Update 2. My ongoing battles with my neighbor Chad have taken an even more troubling turn. It appears that Chad is determined to make my life a living nightmare, and I am losing my patience day by day. It's becoming quite clear that he is arrogant and has a lack of consideration for others. He is living in his own bubble and he gets pleasure in seeing people suffer because of him. So, my wife works as a freelance writer. Last week, as my wife was preparing for an important Zoom meeting with her new client in my home office, I could hear the extremely loud sound of heavy machinery revving up in Chad's backyard. I don't know what wrong on earth I have done to get a demonic neighbor like him. I was frustrated, but I tried to ignore it as my wife had not yet shown any sign of discomfort during her call. But soon the noise became unbearable. Even the client on her call started questioning the noise as it was creating a disturbance for him to explain his business needs. I immediately rushed outside just to find that he had decided to start a major landscaping project right next to my home office window. The deafening sound of bulldozers and chainsaws filled the air, making it impossible for my wife to focus on her work. I called him out of desperation and requested that he put a halt to the noise temporarily so she could just finish her work. It was just a matter of 15 to 20 minutes after all. Without a surprise, his response was just as obnoxious as ever. He simply laughed it off and said, "I can do whatever I want on my property. Your wife and her work are not my concern." This was the first time he made me feel useless and helpless after all. I just hung up the phone without having any further debate with him. It was clear that reasoning with him was futile. I contemplated what to do next. I thought of calling the local authorities to complain about the noise disturbance. As I was about to call, my wife reminded me of the previous futile attempts to involve the police in dealing with Chad. She also mentioned that she requested the client to call back after a few minutes due to some emergency. Luckily, the client was kind enough to understand the situation and agreed to do the same. She had to go to her friend's house just to attend that call. Determined not to let Chad get the best of me this time, I decided to take a different approach. I reached out to some of the other neighbors who had been equally affected by his behavior. We formed a collective complaint, including a petition signed by all the affected households. We hoped that the combined voices of our community would finally make a difference. With our collective complaint in hand, we presented it to the local authorities, hoping that they would take the matter more seriously this time. It was a small victory when they assured us that they would investigate the noise disturbance and Chad's disregard for the peace and safety of the neighborhood. Although it's too early to say whether this will bring about any real change, I'm encouraged by the support of my fellow neighbors. I don't know how much action would be taken against him, if at all, but I and the other neighbors are now adamant that we are going to teach a good lesson to Chad. It's high time we put our foot down to his monstrous behavior. It's about time. Local authorities should have been approached sooner. Update 3. Well, after writing my last update, I thought things would get better or back to normal. But seems like money can buy a way out of any situation easily for people like Chad. Week after week, the situation is just getting worse. He is a living devil who is taking pleasure in making my life a living misery. I was already thinking about getting a house in a different locality despite understanding the financial challenges. I am able to see how bad of an influence it was creating on my 9-year-old. Not just that, my wife has also mentioned several incidents where Chad's ill-mannered pals tried to pass sick comments on her indirectly. I was thinking about moving, but everything changed a week ago while I was clearing my backyard. I didn't realize that a simple task could turn into something serious. As I was almost done, a strong gust of wind suddenly blew dirt and grass clippings into the air. It seemed like nature was against me, sending all that mess straight into Chad's yard. His clean outdoor furniture got covered in debris. It was a disaster caused by pure bad luck. I was not expecting him at home, but unfortunately, I saw him come out of his fancy house, looking pretty mad, though he tried to hide it. This is one of those moments when I regret why I haven't listened to my wife. She had told me in the morning only not to clean the backyard, as according to her, it was going to rain anyway in a day or two. I knew it was already very late to regret now, and I had to bear the consequences now. Without wasting even a single second, he began cursing and shouting at me for ruining his pristine cushions and artwork. I let him rant for a few more minutes, since I figured any conversation with someone as stupid as him would be a waste of time and energy. I'm not going to lie, it felt kind of satisfying to see him taste his own medicine. So, after he finished demeaning me and boasting about his opulent furniture and cushions, when he was venting out, I just smirked and said, "Oh, the wind doesn't know about your expensive furniture," and went inside my house. I knew he was going to be infuriated by my comment and would further vent out, so I let him be. Chad is a spoiled child who won't take no for an answer and demands that I clean his lawn right away. So, to avoid any argument, I just showed my middle finger and bolted my door. I wanted him to enter my premises to charge me or do whatever he wanted. That would have been evidence against him, and I would have sued him for threatening me and my family. But he was an evil man. He had other ideas on his sleeves. To exact revenge on me, he fed cannabis brownies to Adam, my dog. Yes, that's correct. He fed an innocent creature a cannabis brownie, which caused my dog to puke and have diarrhea. Initially, I thought my dog was sick due to weather changes, but after taking him to the clinic, we discovered that it was due to medication intake. When I got home, I decided to check the camera and discovered that my neighbor from hell and his wicked cronies had fed my dog this medication. I'm still in shock. I mean, how can someone do something that horrible? This is totally inhuman. I was about to leave the place, but not anymore. Now my rage knows no bounds, and I am determined not to leave this place, but to force Chad to either leave or change his attitude. I'm going to teach him proper social behavior. I feel like he can get into some serious trouble with authorities for poisoning an animal, especially since you have video footage. That's a serious offense. You can really nail this guy for doing that to you and your poor pooch. Update 4. After my last update, I confronted Chad about what he did to my innocent pet, and he just laughed it off, showing a complete lack of remorse or empathy. I demanded an apology, but he scoffed and said, "Your mutt needed to loosen up a bit. Maybe you should take a page out of his book." I couldn't believe it, the audacity of this man. It was clear that reasoning with him was futile, and it was time to take matters into my own hands. So, I decided to consult with my other neighbors who had also suffered due to Chad's outrageous behavior. We began documenting every instance of his disruptive behavior, from the wild parties to the trash he dumped in front of the elderly couple's house. We collected evidence of his arrogance and disregard for the well-being of others. Armed with this information, we contacted the local homeowners association to file a formal complaint against Chad. Surprisingly, the association took our complaints seriously, and they issued a warning to him about his behavior. It was a small victory, but it felt like progress. However, Chad being Chad, he continued to act defiant and unapologetic. Not willing to back down, we also explored legal options to address his ongoing nuisance. We consulted with an attorney who advised us on potential legal actions we could take against Chad, from noise complaints to harassment. While it might not be a quick resolution, we are determined to see through this. Not to forget my wife and daughter, who have been living in constant distress due to Chad's antics. Still meant to give the comfort and support I was looking for at that time. I'm glad that I was able to control my anger, otherwise I would have been in jail for beating the crap out of him by now. Update 5. After my last update, I was determined to fight back, but I wasn't sure how. But luckily, I had a wife who was as determined as me. She kept telling me, "We have to do something for our sanity and our kids' sake." She always said that Chad doesn't care what we or the other neighbors think of them because we are not his circle of friends and people. So we need to expose him to a social class. My wife came up with a brilliant idea. Chad's dad was an affluent businessman in the town and enjoyed a reputation of being a social worker in his community. The rest of everything was so seamless. We just had to create a page in the name of our housing society and post Chad's narcissistic behavior tagging his dad's affiliates. The post had to go viral to garner the attention of his dad and his rivals. My wife, being in the digital space, knew how to do it well. Each video of Chad's evilness was posted on various social media platforms and was shared and reshared by many groups and individuals. Yeah, that's how easy it was. It took up a couple of weeks before it was noticed by Chad's social circle. As soon as he saw it, he came running to our doors, hurling abuses at us. Yes, we recorded that too, and went online to show the live actions. Like, why not? My evil neighbor from hell found himself backed into a hole as the pressure built in. His dad's rivals were quick to pick our sides and made sure that all our posts went viral and his dad's company's name was brought down. The situation with him has escalated beyond anything I could have imagined, and it was clear that he wouldn't change his ways voluntarily. Earlier, Chad was not bothered about our inconvenience because he didn't care what we thought about him. But now his dad's reputation was at stake. He was being questioned and trolled by people on his social class, and everyone wants to maintain a reputation in their own circle. The hatred towards him grew so intense that local boys started painting his walls as evil, monster, and whatnot. We started getting support from the local community and social groups. Chad was caught up in many fines and noise violation penalties, making his life miserable in front of his elites. I got to know that his dad's reputation also suffered. The NGO and social groups with which his dad was associated criticized him for raising such an evil son. Chad was keeping low-key all the while. We thought he waited for the matter to cool down before appearing again, but this was not true. Chad's house was locked from the outside. Everyone in the neighborhood speculated different theories. Some said that we had left the city, and some said he was living in with his parents until the matter was settled down. After 2 to 3 months, we saw a family shifting in Chad's house. This time I didn't make any move of befriending my new neighbor, but others in the society were interested to know who had moved in and if they were also like the previous one. We got to know that Chad had moved out and his father had rented that property to a family who had moved in. Oh, I cannot thank my stars enough. It is a family of 4 and his youngest son is my daughter's age, so I'm guessing they wouldn't be indulged in any selfish act like Chad did as a bachelor. Yesterday, the man of the house smiled at me and tried to exchange small talk, asking about my family and work. I'm so glad that we were finally able to come out of this mess. I'm praying for a peaceful stay in my house now, but if anything develops, I will update this thread. Thanks for all the support and well wishes. It's sweet revenge. Nothing like a good cancellation. Excellent job. You really shut him up. Good call on leaving the neighbors alone. Sometimes we just have to keep our own inner circle. Not all neighbors are neighborly. Thank you for following along today. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to share regarding today's content, we want to hear it.